Welcome again to another episode of the Complete Free Flutter course, presented by yours truly, Ovidius Manzuru. In this video, we're going to go over layouts once more. We're going to continue what we were doing last time by looking at columns, rows, main axis alignment, cross-axis alignment, and some different things about the way these things interact with each other. When it comes to layouts in Flutter, there are really not that many components that we need to know. We basically have containers, columns, rows, stacks. That's pretty much it. Everything else is just some kind of modification of that or some kind of shorthand for one of these. We're not going to go over stacks in this video because stacks are used slightly differently for different things, but we will be going over the columns and the rows in particular. One thing I would invite you to do in this video and also in the future is whenever you see some kind of UI, start to think in these terms: columns and rows, containers and stacks, and think to yourself, how could I make this using only these components? Because when we look at something like an entire page, an entire UI, it can seem quite overwhelming, it can seem quite complicated, but I promise you that under the hood, it's just these very simple concepts. And in fact, not to get too philosophical, but that's exactly what computers are. They're always extremely simple concepts. Computers are not actually that old. The first one came out in about the 1950s. That only understood ones and zeros, and slowly we built up since then, with each language doing a little bit more than the one before it, giving us a bit more out of the hood, each framework building upon the language. But at the end of the day, computers don't do that much. They only do what we tell them to, and we tell them in quite simple ways and just build those simple things up to be something big and complicated. But leaving that aside, so this is going to be the starting project. It's pretty much the same as last time. I'm importing Flutter material.dart at the top. This is what will give us access to run app, the stateless and stateful widgets, the build methods, material app, and all the other widgets as well. Then I have an arrow function for void main, and all this does is run app, my app, and then in my app, a tiny bit differently than last time, I have the safe area wrapping scaffold, and both of these are inside the material app. With this out of the way, I'm just going to go into body, and I haven't created this yet, but I'm going to just make a widget called layout. So it's going to give me an error because it's not here yet. And I'm quickly going to open my side panel, and I did that with Control B. And what I'm going to do a bit differently than last time is I'm actually going to make a new file and not make the rest of the widgets inside main.dart. The reason I'm doing that is just because I want to start getting you guys used to separating things into components, and in real app I would not have so many things in main.dart. So I'm going to right click on lib, and I'm going to say new file, and here I'm just going to say layout.dart. So now we have our new file. Control B to close that side panel. Then I'm going to say, if you have the Flutter snippets, you can just type impm and then hit enter, which will automatically import Flutter material.dart for you. And once I have that, I'm going to hit stl. Again, you do need the Flutter snippets installed to do this. So stl, enter, and then you can name your widget, which I'm calling layout. And for now, it's just returning an empty container. I'm going to hit Control S to save it, then go back into my other file, then over layout, I'm going to click here, Control dot, which brings up this little option menu, and I'm going to import library layout.dart. Click this, and it's just going to automatically add this import, which is the file we just created. And one thing I'm going to do, just because it's a habit, is that was Control Shift and P brings up this menu, which has some useful things, and I'm going to hit Fix Imports, and nothing actually changes because it was already in the right format. What that does is it makes these look nicer. For myself, it's a habit, so yeah, I just thought I'd rather explain it to you guys than try to break myself out of that habit. I'm going to save this as well. And from now on, we're not going to touch main.dart. We're just going to stay in layouts. Another thing I'm going to do now is make one more widget, STL, and I'm going to call this build box. Anything is fine. And I'm going to give this a final material color. The material color is what we were using when we were doing things like colors.blue, colors.red. It also includes these ones from ARGB. It does not, however, include the blue accents or any of the accent colors. I'm not sure why they don't count them, but they don't. But that's fine. So once we have this, I'm going to control click on color and create a constructor for the final fields. What this is going to do is make this for me, just to simplify it so I don't have to write out this code myself. And now what I'm going to do is, so this is already returning a container. I'm just going to give this a height of 100, a width of 100, and a color of color. And I'm going to save this. So when I use this widget, it's just going to make a square container 100 by 100, and the color property is going to take color, which is this one, which we're passing in the constructor. So going back into layout, what I'm going to do is change container into a column and save it. And a column takes children rather than child. What the column does is it lets us layer things one on top of the other. So I can have one widget here, then below it a second, below that a third, and however many I want, as long as it fits on the screen. And this is very similar, but a tiny bit different than a row. What the row is going to do is put them side by side. The first widget here, second widget here, third widget here. And again, similar but different to a stack. What the stack is going to do is place them one on top of the other. So the first widget will be here, and then the second widget will be above that widget. So it will hide the first widget if they're the same size. And this is really useful for creating some more interesting layouts, but we're not going to go over this for now. So I'm going to put it back as column. So column takes children, and of course the reason it takes children, not child, is because we can have more than one. And inside this children, I'm just going to build 3 boxes using the class I just made. Build box, and I'm going to give it a color of colors.blue, and build box color colors.red, and build box color colors.deep purple. And save it. And now I'm going to go to my terminal and hit R, which will refresh it. And there we go. Now in this panel, we can see the 3 boxes we just made using the build box. If you are curious, the reason I'm using build box rather than just typing this out is, well, just to avoid typing it out, really. One of the things I want you guys to get used to, as I mentioned, is thinking in terms of components. We don't want to be copy pasting code. We don't want to be writing the same thing over and over again. If we can separate our code so that we need to type less, if we can make another widget or another function to help us out so we don't repeat ourselves, that is an amazing thing to do. So you can see, if I wasn't using build box, what I would have to do instead would be just have this code with, if I add another one, colors dots gray, and then I could do it once more for colors dots black, for example. So you can see it does the same thing, but here I'm using 5 lines of code, whereas here I'm using, or we could say 3 lines of code, depends how it formats. Here I'm using either 1 or 3 depending on the format. And in fact, I'm going to get rid of these and format it again, because I think this is short enough to be on a single line. So you can see I am saving some screen real estate. I am typing out less. For this particular widget, it's not a big difference, but I do want you guys to start thinking in that way. So we're going to get rid of this, save it, and reload this. And there we go. We have our 3 boxes on the on the white background, which is the default for the scaffold. And what I'm going to do now is, so as always, I don't really like the way it is when it's over here. I want it to be more towards the center. So I'm going to take my column and control click. There we go, wrap it in a widget, refresh. And that's interesting. Do you see what just happened? My column was centered horizontally, but it was not centered vertically the way I expected it to be. If I had a text widget, my text widget would be over here, but it's not the same here. And in fact, let's see what happens if we try a row instead. So I'll quickly get rid of my center widget. We've removed this widget. Turn my column into a row, save it, and refresh it. So now we can see we have the same thing, but now it's a row rather than a column. Now I'm going to control click and wrap with center. Save it, refresh. So same thing. With the row, it has instead centered it vertically, but not horizontally. So we can see the center widget is not centering everything. It's centering on the axis, which is not our main one. It's centering on the cross axis, but it is not centering on the main axis. And that's really interesting. Let's try something. Let's take our row, control click, and wrap with a container over here. I'm going to give this a color of colors.black. Save it and refresh it. Okay, so this is really interesting, and I'm going to change this to a column so we can see more easily what I mean. The container, remember, is going to by default resize itself if it has a child to fit that child. So the fact that the container goes all the way till here, which we can see with the black, that means the column is taking this entire size. So on the axis we've given it, our column and our row as well is taking the maximum amount of size it can. But on the cross axis, it's taking the minimum amount of size it can. And we can change that if we want to. I could say main axis size and give this main axis size of main axis size.min and save it and refresh it. And if I do this, then now that the column is no longer taking my entire screen, then the center will also center it on the other axis. But it's not the way I'm going to do it this way, because like maybe I want some padding, maybe I want some extra space. So I'm actually going to get rid of this, save it, and we're going to do it a different way. If I go into my column, I can also change the alignment here with main axis alignment. And notice that where a container had alignment, the column has the main axis alignment. And this takes a main axis alignment, and you can see the default is main axis alignment.start. So if I did do main axis alignment.start and save it, nothing's going to change because it's already getting this implicitly without me saying anything. But if I tried dot and VS Code very helpfully gives me these different values. .end. You can probably guess what this is going to do. It's going to put my items at the end instead. Okay, that's great. I also have a few others. Center is the one I was looking for. Save it, and now it's in the center. But this is a tiny bit different than if I had done main axis size. And the reason it's a bit different is because my column is still taking the maximum amount of size, but it's just censoring things. So now there's padding on either side, which we do often want. Okay, we have that. We also have a couple others, which anybody who's worked with CSS Flexbox should be quite familiar with. We have space around. What space around does is it gives us padding automatically. It calculates the amount of padding for us. So each item, each box in this case, will get a top and a bottom padding. And of course, if it was a row, let's quickly turn this into a row, it would give us a left and right padding instead. And you can see when it's a row, it doesn't have that much space. It doesn't give it that much padding. But when it's a column, it has a lot more space, so we get a lot more padding. And the top and the bottom is equal. And because of that, between the boxes ends up being twice as big as being on the side here. All right, so that's pretty cool. Space around. I can also use a space between. What space between does is put all the padding between my widgets, and it leaves no padding on the top and on the very bottom. And then there's one more, which is space evenly. And space evenly is similar to space around, but it makes this space equal to this space. And on the top, because of the safe area view, it might not look the same because your eyes are including this part. But yeah, take my word for it. This is equal to this. Okay, so that's great. That is the main axis alignment. We do also have one more, which is the cross-axis alignment. So whereas the container has a single one, which is alignment, our columns and our rows have main axis alignments and cross-axis alignments. What the main axis alignments will do is align it on our main axis. So on a column, because we go from top till bottom, the main axis alignment will align it here. Whereas our row, the main axis alignment will be the horizontal one. When it comes to the cross-axis alignment, it's going to be the opposite one. So for our column, it's going to be horizontal, which of course is the main axis for the row. So here we can use a cross-axis alignment, and we have a few options. We have start, which is the default. We have end, we have center. But notice the others are a tiny bit different. We don't have space between, space evenly, and so on. If I did try to do space evenly, for example, save it, that doesn't work. And in the bottom here, we can see, I guess, an error. What I could do is stretch, save this. And what this has done is it's told my column to take the maximum amount of size it can on the horizontal axis as well on its cross axis. You know, stretch out all of your widgets, stretch out all of your containers, you know, to get the maximum size. So that's cross axis alignment.stretch. If I were to use start, it's going to be the same as before because this is the default. And if I hold it over, you can see, actually the default is center. I definitely thought it was start. I learned something today. But leaving that aside, so start will put it on the start, but remember that we have our container, our column wrapped in a container, which is wrapped in center. So even though here it's at the start, the column's not taking that much space. And I could more easily show that by wrapping my build box here with control dot in a, it doesn't have what I want, so I'll just use widget in a row, and I'll use children rather than child. And here I'm going to select this part and hit my square brackets. I'm going to put a comma here, control shift I, It formats it for me. Then I'm going to put build box color, colors dot, what haven't we used? Indigo, I guess, and refresh that. So notice that this is perfectly fine. I can have a row as one of the children of the column. I am allowed to nest these things. And in fact, I could take this build box and wrap this one in another column and do that as many times as I want. I can use stacks as well. That's perfectly fine. I have no restrictions on that. So notice that now that I have the row, remember how my column took the maximum amount of space it could vertically? Well, my row is going to do the same thing horizontally. So now that there's a row inside, my column is taking the minimum size it needs for its biggest child. But its biggest child, the row, is taking the maximum size, the entire size it can. So as a result, now my column is covering the entire screen. And now we can see the cross-axis alignments more clearly. So cross-axis alignment.start is going to put them at the beginning. If I get rid of this, we can see center is the default. But notice what's happening here. My row is still at the start. My row has not been centered. Why do you guys think that is? It's because, as you can imagine, my row, if I wrap this in a container, you'll see more easily what I mean. And give this a color of colors.gray. Save it, refresh. My row is taking the maximum space it can. So my row is centered, but the children of the row are not centered. If I did want to center them, I could give it a, and it doesn't go here, give it another argument here of mainAxisAlignment and mainAxisAlignment.center, or one of the space evenly ones, it's also fine. So now I can center it, but I had to do that from row's mainAxisAlignment. I could not do that by wrapping this in a center widget or something like this, because actually it's already centered. It's just this big, so it doesn't seem centered. But yeah, that's that. So I'm going to get rid of this again. And I'm also going to get rid of the container because I don't feel it's necessary. Remove, save, refresh, there we go. So that is the default. Next we have the cross-axis alignment. As you can imagine, there's also a end, cross-axis alignment.end. Refresh it. And you can see the same thing as with the center. The direct children of the column do get aligned, but since these boxes are children of the row and not direct children of the column, they do not get realigned. So that's fine. And then we have cross-axis alignment dot. If I use stretch, as before, the row's already taken the maximum size. And baseline. Baseline gives me an error because baseline is used for text, not for just any widget you want. Okay, so baseline doesn't work, but not with these boxes at least, but don't worry about those. And I think that was it. Yeah. So I'm going to leave this as cross-axis alignment.start for now. Now, do you guys remember the expanded widget we were using last time? Let's see what happens if we wrap our build box with expanded. And I could do it from here, but then I'll have to do it 4 times. And who wants to write all that code? So instead, I'm going to go into my widget and control click here, wrap with widget, and use expanded. And this, by the way, is one of the really great things about separating my code, because now I've changed, well, as soon as I save it, I will have changed all of these 4 boxes at the same time by only changing 1 line of code, instead of having to go through and change all of them separately. I'm going to save this. I'm going to refresh it. Notice that, as we expect, this is going to expand only on the main axis to take the maximum amount of size it can. Notice that it does not expand on the cross axis. So the 2 children of the column end up being very tall, and the 2 children of the row end up being very, very wide. Okay, so that's fine. And then let's just try one more. if we change this to stretch, and we also change this to stretch, see what happens. So that's interesting. You see this, the two children of the column have stretched to fill the entire screen, but the children of the row are just gone. And in fact, if we look over here, if I make my terminal bigger, I have a lot of output, which was not here before. And if I go towards the top, it says, exception caught, the following assertion was thrown during perform layout. Box contains forces and infinite height. Okay, so that's interesting. Essentially what's happening here is that when we use our crossAxisAlignment.stretch, we're telling it to take the maximum amount of size it can. But row is already taking the maximum size it can. Yeah, it just gets really confused. If you try to use crossAxisAlignment.stretch inside a row, inside a column, and also the other way around, it just won't work. You can do it if it's the parent widget, or if the container has a specific height. So if I took my row and I wrapped my row into a container and gave this a height of 100, save it, now it works. Because here my row is bound to the size of the container. My container gives it a size, but my column is not actually giving it a proper size, because my column is trying to take the maximum height it can. The expanded widget will calculate how much height to give the direct children of the column, but these boxes are children of the row, not the column, so it does not do that for me automatically. If I don't specifically give it a size, a height, then it's going to give me an error because it just gets confused. And also, if I were to put these the other way around, turn this into a column and save it, you're going to notice I'm going to have the same error because I need to change this from height to width. Save it. Yeah, there we go. So it does go based on the main axis. Okay, I'm just going to undo these. Save. There we go, guys. That's actually pretty much it when it comes to the layouts. It's not terribly complicated. Everything is built up of rows, columns, and stacks. We can see the way this is done. Remember from last time, we did also go over the flex. Flex is quite important. I do have a quick exercise for you guys to try for next time. We are actually going to do an easy version and a harder version. The easier version is going to be to build this. So using a row or a column, either one's fine. I'd like you guys to try to make the tie flag, and you can have your emulator in this orientation, or you could have it in this orientation. Both will be fine. I don't care if this is flipped, either way is fine. But yeah, so we're going to make our tie flag. Notice the blue part is twice the size of the white and the red. And then for the harder version, we're going to make the Norwegian flag. So 1, 2, 1. So this is 4 units in total. This is 6 units, 6, 4, and this one here is 12. So let's see if you guys can make this one. The tie flag should be much easier, but if you guys can do this one, then you guys are amazing, and I am very, very impressed. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this time. So I hope you guys have learned a lot. Don't forget to like the video if you've learned a lot, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm to myself, Avidius. I'm going to head out.